All right, welcome back. Just as promised, we are picking up exactly where we left off. Without further ado, let's get going. During your time going to Maryland for your follow-ups, was there at any point were you able to get your local oncology or doctor's office within Montana to work in conjunction to, even though they're separate organizations, so
Yeah.
you wouldn't have to necessarily fly out there, for everything. Were you able to do anything similar like what I was doing with the telehealth?
So not only when needed, like if something came up, the team at NCI would talk to the local oncologist here and, try to make things easier, which was great. But for where I was and because I was having such a good response, I really wasn't connected with my local oncologist because there was never a need, there wasn't
Makes
treatment
sense.
being done. There wasn't didn't have side effects or I didn't have a lot going on. So there was a complete detachment for my local versus being out there. And so, no, I went back for every CT scan and blood work out there, and there really wasn't that opportunity. And that's why I think I'm having so much difficulty getting reintegrated into the system as a survivor and figuring out what that looks like.
It's insane that readjustment kind of a period. You had mentioned you took the disability for 5 years. Is that correct? I myself qualified for it and looked into it, but the numbers didn't math up, because I was only put so much money into the system for so long, and it was imperative for me to maintain insurance. And I kind of felt like at a loss because there was no that I didn't see it as there's no other option for me, to not go back to work full time. It was I either go back by this certain date or I had to cover my insurance. But, just coming out of spending 18 months of trying to stay alive to 3 months later going, okay, go back to work full time. It was extremely tough. And the I always kind of felt like I had to like educate whoever it was I was going to see about one, the diagnosis, but two, the treatment, because it's not like everybody is familiar with a one-time treatment where they use your own immune system and you have your fighting army of billions of cells that come through. And so it's this kind of like learning curve and everything, which brings me to ask, how did you get involved with your current position?
Yeah. So good question. So after that second TIL treatment, the data on my case was published in the Science Journal. Yeah, I have it hanging up on the wall there.
Cool.
Yeah, got an
Yeah.
autographed copy of it. It was published in the Science Journal, and then the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and some Associated Press did some interviews. And within that first week that those interviews went out, I literally received hundreds of phone calls from people all over the world. We have a unique name, Bachini, and I think at that time I was one of the very few who still had a home phone number, so people could find me.
Landline.
Yeah, hundreds of phone calls. And patients just wanted to know, they just wanted a sliver of hope. Like they didn't need to know that this treatment would work for them. They just needed to know that there was a possibility. And that is truly when my love for patient advocacy was really born. I mean, I was like, you know, patients just need information. They need that hope. They need possibilities. They need to know that there's people out there working on it. There's researchers, trying to find a way to cure this disease, and or not just this disease, but all cancers. So I started volunteering because I had such a good outcome. And I knew how fortunate I was as a stage 4 terminal cancer patient with cholangiocarcinoma to be here. I started volunteering with the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation. I came on as a discussion board moderator. At that time, they had a discussion board on a website, and patients from all over the world would connect and share information, and then slowly turned into a patient advocate and came on about 7 years as a full-time employee. It just all kind of fell into place, but volunteered for years, served on many national panels, the NCI Council of Research Advocates, the NCI Hepatobiliary Task Force. I'm a patient advocate on the NCCN guidelines panel for hepatobiliary cancers, several different panels where I get to bring the patient voice. And it's not only just sharing my personal story, it's sharing the voice of every patient that has cholangiocarcinoma and the hardships they go through, the struggles they have with access, access to second opinions, access to biomarker testing, access to clinical trials, all of that. And so I really, really feel honored that I get to every day help patients and caregivers with the urgency that I understand that they're feeling, right? You get diagnosed with this cancer, you've never heard of it before, you Google it, you read about it, and it is absolutely terrifying to read online about this disease. I get to be the voice of hope, of me telling people that there's absolutely nothing special about me. And if I can be here 15 years later, the possibility for you to be here 15 years later is there too. I get to share with them about the research being done. I get to share with them about stories of other long-term survivors that you don't get to read about when you Google it. Just give them that hope because it changes everything for them. I can audibly hear them sigh when I'm on the phone with them or on Zoom and say, I'm a 15-year survivor of stage 4. And they're like, what? It just gives them a different perspective. And this is a dismal diagnosis. I'm not trying to sell any false hope in any way, shape, or form. And just because this clinical trial worked for me does not mean it will work for them. And I'm very upfront about that. But again, it's just giving them the tools, the resources, the education, and the support they need to navigate this diagnosis period.
That's incredible because that's exactly what was going through my head when I was diagnosed. And I was literally told over the phone when I got the pathology results, and this was on like a Friday afternoon. It was two things. It was one, hang up and get an appointment because, it's almost 4 o'clock and, they're going to close. So you need to get on schedule immediately. And they told me to not tell any of my family members until I had my appointment and or to Google it or look it up on the internet because one, there's not much out there, and two, what was very dismal and grim, and they're going to have more questions than I had any answers for. But I can't really recall specifically how much I looked it up, but what I wanted was exactly kind of what you're doing, and which was to see a long-term survivor of what they did, how they did it, like so I could, find one, the hope, and two, kind of not really like a roadmap or a blueprint, but just, what are the testimonials, for the successes and everything. And there really wasn't any in 2018, when you go to look it up. And so I just didn't do it. And it wasn't until years later I started to get into that. But I have a subtype of melanoma, and there's a handful of different main melanoma organizations out there. Starting with the Melanoma Research Alliance, Melanoma Research Foundation, Aim at Melanoma, so forth. And does your diagnosis for cholangiocarcinoma, is there more than one organization or foundation out there, or are you pretty much set with the main one for here in the
Yeah.
States?
So we definitely are the main resource here in the US, focused specifically on cholangiocarcinoma, bile duct cancer. There's many other advocacy organizations popping up internationally that we are helping to assist with resources and tools. We share everything. We just want, advocacy groups to be able to have access to the material so they can help patients in their country because they're the experts in their country. We serve international patients, but there's nothing I like better than to be able to direct them to a local advocacy organization who knows about the health system there, knows about the doctors there, and, they can get more fine-tuned assistance. We're definitely the leading advocacy organization in this type of cancer, cholangiocarcinoma, bile duct cancer. But I'm seeing new groups pop up internationally, which just makes my heart happy because I know then patients everywhere are going to be able to have access to resources and support. And we know that patients who get access to this kind of support and education and learn how to advocate for themselves do better. They do better long term. They have a longer term survival and do better for themselves.
Yeah, they're not trying to navigate a road that's, hasn't even been paved yet, and it's got like, brush and bumps and stuff and with no kind of guidance. That's such an incredible thing to be able to have and to look for. When that article was done on your case for the NCI and everything, had you done any other mini interviews or publications sharing your story much prior to that?
Not a whole lot other than speaking at the Capitol a couple times to get that bill passed. And then no, that was after the article. I spoke the first time at the second annual Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation conference. I was the first patient speaker there. And Chris, my two biggest fears are public speaking and I'm scared of heights. And now I do public speaking all the time and I have to fly a lot. It's funny how you can overcome your fears to do what's important to do.
No, absolutely. I remember thinking when I was going through everything, that even though it was my chance for survival was in the teens and everything, but I was thinking that Dumb and Dumber line, like there's a chance, and I was like, man, how cool would that be? One, if I was that chance, and I needed to ride that energy, and for me, it was always like, not like if I make it, but when I make it, I want to be able to provide so much more, one, about the disease and the treatments, and just be so loud about it that with the next person that comes along, that searches mucosal melanoma, or mucosal melanoma survivor, or TIL therapy, there's enough testimonials and content and stuff that's populated to where it's like, okay. And that was kind of my thing. I didn't know how I was going to do it. When I was going through my actual treatment, I was in such this, like, a weird headspace that I wasn't on much social media. My stuff was still private. My family was giving the updates, and I had joined a support group when I was going through the treatment, but I couldn't emotionally handle it. And so I removed myself from the group during that time, and I didn't rejoin it until like a couple of years after I did TIL. And it was one of those things to where I felt like I was almost dreaming for so long, because it just didn't seem real, that I went through everything I did, and then I did this treatment that I did one time, and it worked, and I just felt like I needed to stand on the rooftops and tell everybody about it, and I wanted to do that full time.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I do what I do. But I remember being connected to you and just going, wow, like you're two or three times like the survivor length from doing this treatment. I guess from the day you're diagnosed, that's when you're considered you're a survivor, no matter what happens afterwards. So for me, that's coming on, I'm about like 7 years, and you just mentioned now 15, but it's now been what, 8 since your last actual treatment
Treatment.
treatment.
Yeah. 8 years since my actual last treatment, but definitely a 15-year survivor. And in some ways, it feels like it just was yesterday, and other times it feels like it's been a lifetime. But it's just incredible, and I'm just so blessed. There's a lot of survivor's guilt, and that's why I do what I do, because I think I would feel like a big old piece of poo if I didn't find a way to, pay it forward, because I know how fortunate I am to be here, and I just want to help others navigate this diagnosis to the best of their ability. And so I think part of it is to help others, but part of it is to alleviate that survivor's guilt, and make sure so I get just as much out of it, I think, as what I give, for sure. It's a two-way street. And I always went into this diagnosis of, I have strong faith. I'm a Christian. I strong faith, so I had a sense of peace, and I felt like if I died, I got to go to heaven, and that's exactly where my end destination is anyway. And if I lived, I get to stay with my family. Of course, I want to live. I don't want to deprive them without a mother or wife. And so there was a fight, but at the same time, I had that sense of peace. And then moving forward, I just feel like, as a paramedic, I saw people die in car accidents every day without any warning, right?
Anything can happen at any time.
Exactly, whether you're a cancer patient or not. So moving forward now, I think it's important to, nobody knows what tomorrow brings, whether we have cancer or not, right? It just is one of those things, and it's up to us to do the best we can to live every day to the best of our ability. And that's why being an advocate, it means the most to me. It's just my way to be able to live the best that I can every day and be able to help others. I don't feel like I'm always helpful or can do enough fast enough or have the answers fast enough. But if I can just have a little part of, being that glimmer of hope for others, then I think it's worth it. And for those times where you actually do make a difference for someone, and get them into a clinical trial where they have a good response, and those are just huge payoffs. And then 90% of the time, I see those people paying it forward too. And it's just like a spiral effect, right? Of
Snowball.
yes, yes,
Like, I have a confession, because I it's the best therapy for me, period, is being able to talk about it, and to talk about everything that I went through to somebody else that is needing that kind of hope. And the survivor guilt thing hits me so hard, because same kind of efficacy with doing the treatment is, it's not going to work for everybody. And there's no known cause for, some diagnosis and or standards of care. And then but there's also when it does work and there's no explanation for why it worked for you when it didn't work for anybody else. It's extremely tough. And I was spending 150 $200 an hour, like going to a therapist, for them just to listen and shake their head. And it's like I was just trying to explain to them, one, the background of what I went through, and the diagnosis, the treatments, and then also cell therapies. And I'm giving them this kind of free education. And so I'm a huge advocate for, one, sharing my story, period, no matter what. But two, for clinical trial design and even, commercial, releases and everything. But having a sort of counselor or therapist with some background knowledge of, one, both the disease, but two, like the specific treatments and the advanced cell therapies, doing these autologous one-time treatments, these curative new novel modalities. It's having that kind of knowledge, and being a proactive approach to a patient. Because if a patient has to go and like ask for help, it's one thing. But majority of the time, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, is they want it, they just don't know how to ask, and they feel frustrated that there's not anybody that they feel understands what they're talking about with the baseline knowledge of it. When I was able to meet you and know that you did TIL and had this long-term survivorship from it, and connect with other people with other diagnosis, and that to me has become the best therapy, period, across the board. And I just feel that both clinical trials and the manufacturers of these cell therapies, that this has got to be something that's included as they're
Mhm.
writing consents and doing planning and budgeting and everything that goes into it. So that's provided in a proactive sense.
Yep. Agreed, 100%. I always want to see in clinical trials a way for patients to connect with others who are currently in the clinical trial or who have been through the clinical trial. And I think it could be an easy process in the consent form of patient opt in to having your name shared with, other patients who come down the line, or opt out, and I don't think it needs to be as difficult as we make it to be able to make those connections and foster those relationships.
Did you ask that specific question when you were signing your consents and everything? Is there anybody that has done this before, whether you're diagnosis or not, but that has done TIL that you could connect with or they could connect you with?
Well, I didn't ask if there's anyone I could connect with, but I did ask how many patients have been through it and how many were successful. And I was the ninth, and there was no successes. So I was just like,
Wow.
yeah, I was like, all right, let's just, what do I got to lose, kind of thing, moving forward. But now moving forward, I see the importance of it all the time. I I know for me, when I was diagnosed with this cancer, again, like you said, you joined support groups, but there was never another cholangiocarcinoma patient. And like it just wasn't the right fit. I could never find that. So connecting into your community where the person you're talking to understands what you're saying, is in the same shoes you're going through, having the same issues, makes all the difference in the world. And I know it now because we host online virtual support groups with patients all over the world, and I see the impact it has on those patients and caregivers to be able to connect with each other in the same type of disease area, right? And a lot of times they'll connect with treatments, like you said,
That's
I have this mutation, what one do you, and are you taking this drug? And it's just, you start with the same type of cancer, but then you narrow it down even further to more specifics, and all of those connections just make it where you don't feel so alone. Like you're not going through this alone. You're not alone anymore. And I think that's the biggest part
yeah.
of bringing people together.
The sense of community. At first, it was I was specific to mucosal melanoma, and that was my main support group. But the average age of that is diagnosis is 70 years old. I was 36 when I was diagnosed, 37, almost 38 when I went through it. But even though there are other survivors within that diagnosis, and also other patients I've connected to with the same treatments, and also that I've done TIL, like it was a lot harder for me to feel connected because I was single, like I was just getting my career started. I wasn't in the retirement thing, and just the scenario of other patients, and then so it was I had to become comfortable with being uncomfortable with branching outside of my diagnosis, and that's how I got connected to other melanoma patients. But then even more funneled is to be able to connect with other patients that have specifically done TIL, and then that's been like when you keep on funneling and funneling and funneling and stuff, that's where I've found my greatest sense of community, because it's not just the rare cancer that I had, but for TIL, it's for solid tumors. And once I started digging in and learning about Dr. Rosenberg and how long he's been working on TIL and IL-2 and all the research and everything that's come out since then, and it's you start looking at 90% of cancers. I've been able to connect with breast cancer patients, lung cancer patients, people that will reach out in the DMs saying they're getting ready to sign this clinical trial, but they're real curious about the lymphodepletion, what it's like doing having Rigers. There's so many different versions and forms and locations and sponsors, but that's the sense of community that I feel like I've been able to kind of hone in onto, is to talk about TILs. And so it's become the best therapy. Like I was saying, I was spending $200 an hour like for them just to shake their head and go, okay, so you're on for next week, right? Like of course they'll take my money. And I just felt kind of used, and it was like night and day difference
Right.
being
Right.
able to talk, to even all the side effects that came along that I had post doing TIL, all came from all the treatments I did before doing TIL. Like one of the greatest things is my white eyelashes now, and the white hair. Like that's what sparks up conversations everywhere I go. I gotta ask, did when you do that lymphodepletion, that chemo definitely wipes out everybody's hairs out and stuff.
Yep.
Did you
Yep.
have the white grow back, or
Oh
is
yeah,
that
it came back by this is totally colored hair, but
okay?
I was hoping the gray would go away, but it did not. Every time I lost my hair, it came back curlier and curlier. But yeah, the gray was still there. And I'm just not there yet, Chris. I can't do it. You look great though.
I gotta tell you, when it first started growing back, I was like, okay, this is weird, because I lost all my melanocytes too. And so I looked like completely different. And then as those were trying to come back, it was extremely splotchy. My pictures in 2020 and then early into 2021, I was just so overly freckled. But by the time I went to go get my first haircut, I was way too self-conscious about it, and I dyed my hair, back to brown, and then I just looked even more weirder. So I decided from then, I was like, okay, I don't want to shave my head again or anything, but I'll let this grow out. And so I kind of had that backwards, like two-tone look. In high school, I had brown hair and then dyed it with blonde tips. Now I had white hair with brown tips that were dyed. And so, and it looked kind of weird and everything. And I had to let that grow out. But it took a while to become comfortable in my own skin, literally and figuratively, per se. You know what I mean? And like, because it was different. My own phone doesn't recognize me. Everything pre 2020 to post 2020, it says Chris White, and then after 2020, it's a different. It just says person. And like going through TSA, if I grow a beard, it doesn't recognize me through my driver's license, and you know what I'm saying, like. So I can't grow any facial hair through that, because it's just like it's completely
I,
different.
I always say I was going to put together a montage of hairstyles over the years of losing hair, growing hair, losing hair, growing hair, and what it looked like over the cancer hair, montage. I'm going to do that someday, because it is kind of interesting.
Do you have I know you're got your profile on LinkedIn, and your profile with your foundation, and everything. Do you have like a link tree? Do you have your own website?
No, I do not. I do not. I'm on social media, all the social media except for, I'm not a TikToker. I'm too old to learn new tricks, but maybe
No, no, you're
someday.
not. I was thinking I didn't get one until like 2023,
Well,
and then
okay, I will strive to make that my New Year's goal this year, to add that one to it. One, I always say that it's not about me being on there, but it's about reaching other patients, right? And so you have
yeah,
to have every avenue
yeah,
available for sure.
yeah. Each
I get
demographic.
Yes. There's not a day that goes by that there's not a patient or a caregiver that reaches out to me through one source of social media. You Google my name or you Google cholangiocarcinoma,
There
90% of the time my name will pop up. And so I want to be found. I want to be searchable so people can find me and so I can plug them into the resources they need. Um,
That's why I wanted to ask because over the years, I mean, that was your first article that's on the wall behind you, right? So since then, I mean, there's got to be a collection of them somewhere. I mean, surely, I mean, obviously, you're probably in your LinkedIn. You can Google them, but is there like a one-stop shop source to where you can just be like, here's all the different interviews, podcasts,
no, but
webinars,
you've just inspired me to make that happen. So I'm going to do that. It's on my to-do.
GoDaddy.com. That's what, there's like, you know, I, I, I got mine in 2022 because I wanted people specifically when they Googled mucosal melanoma, but I wanted them to Google mucosal melanoma survivors. And
Yes.
so that
And that's
was,
what they do for me too.
they
Yes.
wanted, they want to see that. And then every time I do a social media post or anything on my own on those platforms and or do an interview or a guest blog or a webinar, once it gets done and then I go to share it, I hashtag it with that. And so, so it's both, melanoma, mucosal melanoma survivor. And then, I started my LLC in 2023, but I also last year in 2024, when I started doing paid speaking engagements, I started a website called Your TIL Speaker because TIL, I knowing that it got its first approval. It actually last year got its second approval, Adaptimmune got one for a sarcoma and there's going to be many more to come, but the need for that, when people go to look that up, that's the thing, like they look up your diagnosis and boom, there's all kinds of stuff for you and everything. And so it's that SEO, it's being searchable, it's being findable. But I gotta tell you, I'm kind of surprised you don't have like your own website, or I mean even like a link tree. And those are just like these little free websites where you can just add the links to all the different articles that you've done. And like I
I'm going to count on you to help me get this done. I
yeah,
need some help with that. I've not done that.
like, but there's, I mean, I gotta imagine there's probably dozens upon more, and everything.
There's a lot of information out there. And yeah, I cannot say that I have them all in one place, but it would be great to do that.
Like, you like say for example YouTube. If we go in there and plug in your name in YouTube, there's got to be interviews, speaking things you've done. I watched you speak for a part of your talk at ASCO. I came in like right after it started, had to leave before it was in. I didn't get to really go say hi and everything, but I remember thinking like, freaking, I want to be, speaking at ASCO. Like I was blessed to be there and I was so glad, but I try to take advantage of every opportunity there is out there, whether it's a panel, it's a stage, it's a conference.
Yeah, so important. And I've been so fortunate again and so blessed to work with some of the most amazing physicians and researchers who actually want the patient voice to be a part of those panels. And I've been fortunate enough to be pulled into those and invited into those. And I will take advantage of every single one for this reason alone. It's so important to, yeah, to get the voice out there of the patient and information about the TIL therapy, information about the cancer, information about patients in general.
So what do you get inquired about more? Your diagnosis or TIL?
The diagnosis, but then the TIL therapy comes
It's a
right
part
along
of it.
with it because how did you beat it? Why are you here? What is it? Is it still in clinical trial? So it's hand in hand, but it's definitely the cholangiocarcinoma that people find me from because again, it's such a devastating diagnosis, and when they Google it, if I can be someone they can find on Google, they want to know how I'm here 15 years later.
Have you thought about writing a book?
Yes, yes, I've been thinking about it for years, and it is I've got some friends who are gently nudging me to stay on track this year. I've got so much information from over the years. Um my son right there, Skylar, I was actually diagnosed on his 14th birthday. And we lost him unexpectedly at age 24, which is a whole nother story. But it plays into my story in the fact that we were able to donate his organs, and his liver went to a cholangiocarcinoma patient, which kind of, just made this kind of a whole full circle thing. But I've wanted to share that whole experience of how it doesn't just affect you, it affects the whole family in many different ways. And yeah, and again, like I said, just because you have cancer doesn't mean bad things don't happen down the road and you don't have to deal with tragedy again. And finding ways to deal with the tragedy. And I've always been one to look for the good, and I want to continue to do that. Otherwise, I don't know how you get through every day. But yes, back to writing a book. I want to write a book so bad.
Oh, God bless you, Melinda. I mean, my heart just dropped when you told me that. I mean, I can't imagine. I never had any children. I did fertility preservation, and so it's not like out of the, the possibilities ever. But each year, I make that payment and everything, and that was, a huge goal for me to, to be a father, start a family, and all that. And then after I went through the cancer thing, but that just my heart just breaks to hear that. But to also hear you mention how he was able to donate the organs, it kind of came full circle. Like that's super meaningful. Surely over the years since you've done so many interviews, and you're very searchable. I'm sure you got enough writing written down to where you can just kind of put it out there. And the advice that I was given was, to self-publish was just go buy a block of ISBNs, and then that's those they never expire. And then from there, it's it's figure it outable. But you can self-publish, or you can go with a publisher. And I was too impatient to go with a publisher because it's a lot of back and forth and this and that. But yeah, like if there's anything I can do to help you with that process, I was kind of coached a little bit and learned how to kind of do that. But I would love to read your story in your words, and then talk about everything that goes along with that. Because I mean, I feel like we're only touching upon just a fraction of like the things that go into one, the diagnosis, and, the treatments, and the importance of talking about it all.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, you have inspired me, and I will take you up on that. I'm sure I'm going to reach out for some help on that, but definitely on my list. Yeah, I want it's on my New Year's resolutions every year, but I want to mean it this year. I really want to mean it.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you before too much time got away and everything. When it goes to attending conferences or summits or symposia and this and that, I saw you at ASCO, giving a speech. I know you that you have your direct conferences and events that go with your carcinoma. But outside of that, like, is there cell therapy specific events or conferences that are that relate or that have to do with TIL that you are involved with or you attend?
Yeah, so I try to jump in wherever I can, wherever I'm asked to be a part of the TIL story, the cell therapies, but mostly just due to my job and my title, it's the conferences that are cancer related. But I can tell you that I have been to ASCO, I've been to AACR, I've been to so many big cancer conferences where I'm in the audience and Dr. Rosenberg is presenting, or one of his members of the surgery branch are presenting, and my slide pops up in
You're
the
like, hey.
conference. Yes, and it still ceases to not give me goosebumps, and I'm like pinching myself to make sure it's real, and or there's not a doctor that knows me saying, taking a picture, sending it to me and lick and saying, hey. So I've had the opportunity in the platform to speak on the TIL therapy in many different areas. The FDA, I've worked with Dr. Rosenberg on different presentations, different committees. Right now, I'm a patient advocate with the C3 Collaborative, which is a Canadian group that is doing a specific TIL protocol and helping as an advocate with that. The TIL therapy is near and dear to my heart. Like, that's something I would always jump in and help on if the opportunities arose. But for the most part, I tend to represent the cholangiocarcinoma community and the research and the stuff that's going on there. But it never ceases to not go hand in hand.
No, absolutely. I been trying to get my foot in the door more with specific cell therapy events. And last May, the Friends of Cancer Research, I'm an advisory advocate with them, and they had their cell therapy conference. That's where I met Tom Whitehead. And, there was 2 panels. It was a one-day deal, and Tom was given a caregiver perspective on the first panel, and I was given the patient perspective on the second. But, I started to look into, okay, what's all out there that's specific for cell therapy. And then, there's ARM, there's the ISCT, the ASGCT, the ACGT, and I would have figured surely, there'd be a crossover at some point, both with, because of your story, and, to be on, to speak or be on a panel or to participate in those, as well. And so,
Definitely probably need to put myself out there more because I'm definitely willing to do it. Again, it's that whole there's so much work to be done and not enough time to do
yeah,
it. But wherever I can, I jump in. So if you hear of anything, please keep me in mind.
absolutely. And I want to follow up with you about that C3 in Canada, because I've had people reach out to me that are, in Canada, and their resources, or, they're trying to research, what's available for TIL out there. And, when you go to look it up, I try to remind people that, when you're in that search bar, to step outside of not just your diagnosis, but when you enter the words, one TIL, but just advanced cell therapies, or, since it's a solid tumor, there's these other kind of key words, that can populate that, you might not come across. But once you see it on there, it's just a phone call to find out, if maybe you could be included or not, but you
That's
don't
what I
know.
always say too. It never hurts to make that phone call and get all the information you can.
Absolutely. We've been on here, I think, almost an hour and a half. I can't thank you enough for joining this with me. I really look forward to our next one. Before we get off, is there any words of advice or anything, that, like, if you could tell yourself 15 years ago, any kind of information or words of inspiration, or to anybody out there listening that's, searching, or needing that hope, what would you say?
Yeah. So one thing that I definitely like to share a lot with is I told you, I made that decision to stop all treatments, but 3 weeks later, a door opened where another treatment option was available. And I just want patients to know that you can make these decisions, but still be open to possibilities, right? And nobody knows what doors are going to be open the next day or the week later or 3 weeks later. And so just, be open to that, but be confident. I don't ever want patients to regret decisions. I think sometimes our decisions get us to where we need to be in that moment. But number one, advocate for yourself, make those phone calls, ask those questions, and then be okay making your decision if enough's enough, and just enjoying every minute you have with the most quality that you can get. But again, realizing that that could change tomorrow. The newest advanced science could come out tomorrow and there could be another option. Just there's always possibilities,
Ask for
opportunities.
forgiveness, not permission.
Exactly. And just, yeah, sometimes that door never closes. It might crack it a little bit, but it's never closed all the way. And yeah, just do your best. Always remember there's a hope regardless. And there are many people out there working to increase opportunities for patients to have longer term survival every single day.
Well said. Well said. And once again, I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing, and talking with me. And God bless you, Melinda. I
You
mean,
too.
it's
Thank you.
so it's for me, like I said, to be able to connect and to talk with other patients that have long-term survivors or survivorship, and that are, doing well, they're paying it forward, they're, those are the testimonials about these novel advanced cellular therapies, that I just feel they don't get that enough love. They don't get the attention. And it's us as the patients that have gone through it, I feel, to be able to talk about it and get the word out, word of mouth. I think it's the best advertising ever. And it's just, having a conversation.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you. And thank you for the work you're doing and keep it up. And let me know how I can help in the future.
well, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll be in touch, and we'll connect here very soon. I thank you so much, Melinda.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
Sounds good.
All
Thank
right. Take
you.
care.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
All right, that concludes today's episode of TIL Talks with Chris White as we talk TILs, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell therapies. I want to take this time to thank today's guest for joining in and participating in the conversation, and also take this time to remind our listeners who have not done so already to follow, comment, subscribe, share, and smash that like button. Want to send love out to everybody and thank you for all your support. If you have interest in joining in the conversation on TIL Talks, or if you would like to sponsor or be a part of the conversation, please reach out to mucosamelanomasurvivor.com and or yourtilspeaker.com. Sending love and always peace.